Welcome to your Route to Wellbeing podcast. I'm Sue Fullergood, and I'm absolutely sure that you deserve to feel great, and it's possible for you to pulse with energy. So if you're not thriving right now, or if there's something that's interrupting your thriving, then maybe this podcast is just what you're looking for. I've tapped into the knowledge base of experts in the 11 domains of well-being. Each of the experts has something that I think is part of the crucial knowledge that you need to be able to really take care of yourself. And so listen in and see if you can get that magical piece of information that's going to make the difference for you. Please feel free to share this with your friends and family, whoever you think may benefit from it. Please push the subscribe button so that you can be alerted when future episodes are available. Thank you for listening. Hi, I'm Sue Fullergood, and I am your podcast host today on your route to well-being. I started this podcast specially for you because I believe that people have the right, and it is their birthright to be able to thrive. And I wanted to give you the tools to be able to do exactly that in your life. Thrive and therefore have wonderful well-being. And so today I've invited Steve Johnson to come and be our guest and to share with us his insights, hello Steve, into what it is about his worldview which enables well-being to come into focus. So Steve is a wildlife whisperer. He has had endless escapades into Africa. He is a highly experienced in executive management, and he's a life coach, a consultant to the United Nations, a speaker, and he has so much insight into psychology, which is his passion. And he's very passionate about ecology and how there's an interconnection between all things on the planet, which is music to my own ears because I'm absolutely a believer in that. And we as human beings are part of ecology. We are animals, even though we like to think of ourselves as being separate to the animal kingdom. And so we've got lots to learn from Steve, and I'm really here to download some of the ingenuity out of Steve's brain and life experiences into this podcast so you can learn from it, and so can I. So without further ado, Steve, can I ask you to just tell us a little bit about your career, how you got to be the expert that you are today, and how did it all unfold for you?
Yeah, and thanks for having me on the podcast, Sue. I've listened to you chat before, and I get totally inspired when you speak. My upbringing essentially is what inured me into my passion of nature and wild areas or natural areas. I grew up on a farm in Zimbabwe, a tobacco farm, and I loved just exploring in the wonderful Masasa woodlands that they have there. And I remember being on a neighboring farm. We were staying the weekend or something there, and my brother woke me up very early one morning. The sun hadn't even really risen, and he said, Steve, come with me. I want to take you to find the nest of a lilac-breasted roller, a most beautiful bird we have in Africa here. And so we got dressed and we went out from the house. He'd noticed about a kilometer away a kopje or a hillside, rocky hillside. We'd seen the bird kept flying into that area. So he was going to go and find this nest. He was an avid birder. So we set off very early. And as we walked along this very narrow path in the long savanna grass, I happened to look to my right into the rising sun, just as it peeped above the horizon and was sending out its long golden rays. And as those rays shone through the dewdrops that were on the seed heads of that tall grass, it was like a burst of a kaleidoscope of millions of colors, all as they came through the dewdrops. And I stood there, 4 years old, totally mesmerized. And it was something that was so deep in my soul, that beauty in nature, that it is what has driven my passion from that time onwards, always wanting to get out in the wild as often as I can. But in life and in wellness, a lot of the things that we respond to come out of some form of trauma. It's either the death of somebody or some incident that we are exposed to. In my case, we had left Zimbabwe at that point. I was 12 years old. We'd immigrated to Cape Town. When just before Christmas, my best friend back in Zimbabwe had phoned me and said, come back and spend Christmas with us on the farm, as we often used to do as families. So at 12 years old, just before Christmas, my parents put me on a train in Cape Town on my own, with a little suitcase and my passport. And I traveled alone for 3 days and 2 nights on that train, 12 years old, to Zimbabwe. It was a wonderful adventure, I can tell you that. But when I arrived at the farm, I thought I was just going to be the one friend that was with him. I saw that there were 5 other boys our age, and I knew many of them from a private school that they went to. And there were 6 other young girls the same age. So we kind of messed around in the afternoon, but it was on the second morning that we were around the swimming pool at the Lapa, and one of the guys who I recognized to be a bully got up and said, we're going to play a game, and we need 6 girls and 6 boys, but there are 7 boys. And then he looked at me and he said, but you came last, so you just leave us alone. You just go away from us and let us 12 sit here again. And he said it in such a disparaging and demeaning way. I was totally shocked and embarrassed. I looked at my best friend, who avoided my gaze. And so I walked off in total embarrassment, firstly, but in humiliation as well, because as I walked away, the 6 young girls started giggling. The 12-year-old psyche is very brittle. It really, really is. You're just starting to find out who you are as a human being. And so my psyche broken, my spirit broken, I climbed another copy that was behind that farmhouse, and I climbed onto a very large rock that looked out over the farm and the natural areas of the farm. And I sat there crying and wondering what had I done that I'd come all this way, 3 days and 2 nights, 2,000 kilometers, to be with my friend, to be treated like that. And as I sat on that rock, just like sobbing, with a fury in my gut that I'd been treated that way, suddenly a dove came into a masasa tree that was hanging over the rock, and it started cooing, as you know the doves do. And a wonderful sense of calmness just descended over me in that moment, just that sound and that natural setting. And that calmness brought a revival or a renewal within me. That anger in my belly totally left me, but it made me commit myself that I would never ever allow myself to be put into such an embarrassing and demeaning situation before, and I would not allow other people to allow that to happen to them. The second part of that was, I realized, 12 years old, it's amazing, that this wonderful setting of just looking out over nature and being in nature, being part of nature, was healing. And I then, at that point in time, decided that's what I wanted to do with my life, is to protect these wonderful places that are natural and that are spiritual and have this healing power. Fast forward, I went to university in Cape Town, studied ecology and biology, etc. And then went back to Zimbabwe to join national parks. And that was really the kind of highlight of my life, is that I got into national parks and was posted to very remote areas where I could be in these wonderful wild areas amongst wild animals and protect them and look after them. But it was in that whole process that I realized that we as human beings, we need to be working within and with nature to be whole, to have wellness, and to find our being and our meaning in life within a greater consciousness of our being in our world. We've lost so much of that. We have learned through the ages, or our economic situations in various countries and globally have led us to be more individualistic and less communal, community orientated. And that individualistic tendency brings with it an unnatural way of being in our world, where we don't connect with each other. We're competing with each other, and therefore we're competing against nature. And it brings with it, at a cost, huge unwellness, a lot of problems, a lot of mental problems, a lot of physical problems as well, pollution, etc. So that, in a nutshell, is what has got me to where I am now. I've gone through the ranks in various conservation agencies and have got executive management experience. And I've focused my life into conscious leadership, legacy-based leadership.
Thank you. Thank you for explaining the origins and the journey, because that does help us to understand your deep, heartfelt passion for this work that you do. And I love the story about right at the beginning, about that gorgeous morning when you were 4 years old. I can't think of a better description of well-being. And maybe you just had a taste of what it feels like to be fully alive and fully present, which I think absolutely underpins well-being. Wow. So what a story. So what is, and I'm going to use your word, the moniker Mondavis, how do you say it? I'm not even sure, actually signify?
Yeah, it's just an interesting thing that has emerged over my life, in wild areas and wild places, working with communities, local communities, and with the local people that are in national parks or the protected areas that we've been managing. It's Mandevu with a U on the end. Mandevu means the bearded one, okay, and it often has a connotation of if the beard is grey, okay, then it's the one that has wisdom, okay. And so even my son, who's 45 years old, he even calls me Mandevu, okay. It's just stuck with me. It's like people get their funny nicknames. Mine got that, but it's also embedded in the work that I've done with a lot of many hundreds and possibly thousands of communities I've worked with over my career across Southern Africa, in getting our communities to look after their own wildlife that they live with and amongst. The communities in rural areas of Zimbabwe, Zambia, Angola, etc., live with elephants and lions amongst them, okay. And so I was fortunate to be part of the birth of a movement called community-based natural resource management. And in that process of helping the communities gain their rights to look after their wildlife, etc., I've been inducted into 3 local tribes in Southern Africa. It's the Zulu, the Botswana, and the Ngoni in Malawi. And that is a link with the name Mandevu. It's used almost universally across Southern Africa as an elder person.
Okay. So you weren't always an elder person, but maybe you've developed your wisdom really, really early on. Can you tell us a little bit more about your philosophy in life? What do you believe life is all about? Why are we here?
You know, philosophies in life change depending on the context and the situation and the experiences that one has. And having grown up on a farm, and the only people that I really had to play with there as a very young child were the children of the people that worked on the farm. And my parents were always very liberal in their attitude and their worldviews, and engendered that into my siblings and myself. And so we've always been brought up to believe that people are people across the board. Okay, we are all the same, and we have the same aspirations in life. We have the same wants and needs. And so my philosophy in life has always been to work with and accept people and the diversity that they bring. Okay. So I've always tried to bring different types of people into my life to be able to actually absorb some of their wisdom and their ways of thinking from whichever group they come from. But more recently, I've been on a journey of self-reflection. I've studied, strangely enough, although I'm in the wildlife field, adult education from my primary degree and my master's degree from a communal perspective with the cultural elements to it. And the philosophy that has been emerging is that we're all on a journey towards self-actualization. We're all on a journey to find the meaning in our lives and the purpose in our lives and why we are around. And the meaning in our life, to me, is central. My meaning emerged at that age of 4 years old with the beautiful kaleidoscope of colors experience. And sitting on that rock, some of the purpose in my life emerged, that I was going to look after this wonderful environment that we have in Africa, and also that this making sure that injustice didn't take place, and that everybody's treated fairly and equitably. And that has colored my life and my value system and my worldview throughout. And more recently, I've realized myself, being 72, that you start to wonder more and more. And I've done research into this, personal research into this, even though some people might begin to try to think about, why am I on this planet at an early age of 20, 30? It's more of a deeper question the older one gets. And I find through my research that many of the people that have reached their life's ambitions of being big leaders, CEOs of companies, vast fortunes, lots of cars, maybe houses and holiday homes, and travel the world, etc., they get to a point where that is still not enough. And in Maslow's hierarchy, the self-actualization element starts to kick in. Is what does all of that mean? Have I made a difference in this world? Am I going to leave this world in a better place? Am I going to be remembered as this tyrant that ran this big corporate, as a terrible person, and hired and fired and destroyed people's family lives, etc.? Or am I going to be seen in a different light? And so I'm on a journey now to help those people who are coming to that point of questioning in their lives. It could be when they're 50, it could be when they're 60 or 70. But it's all embedded around wellness, because that mental state, as you know exceptionally well, okay, is all linked to our biological functioning. And if you're constantly under a state of stress as a CEO or a leader or a person managing a business, you are, if that constant stress is not in some ways diverted and you are allowed times to be calm, etc., you're going to end up with some kind of illness or disease or something like that, or cancer is going to come in. Okay, I've seen that actually happen with colleagues of mine. And so my philosophy in life more at the moment is this legacy-based leadership. And everybody thinks the legacy that they will leave are those wonderful words that will always be spouted at some kind of memorial service or a funeral, in a eulogy. That's not a legacy. It's not the nameplate that might be put on the door of a building or something like that. The actual legacy that you leave, or the actual legacy that counts, put it that way, is doing good all day, every day, in the moment. Doing good all day, every day, in the moment. That is what is, at the end, the one thing that counts. Okay, that you are leaving this world a better place by having treated people well, with respect, made them feel good, made them feel that they belong, unlike me when I was kind of excluded from that group on the rock. So doing good all day, every day, in the moment. And that comes from the Gestalt training that I've had for my facilitation and coaching, etc. It's that the whole is bigger than the sum of the parts. The whole is bigger than the sum of the parts. That's the Gestalt philosophy. That we might have done a lot of things, building great buildings or big companies, etc., etc. But it's the peripheral elements to all of that, the doing good all day, every day stuff, that makes it bigger than the sum of the parts. Those parts of buildings and having managed companies, etc., etc., are actually inconsequential. They're materialistic things. The stuff that really counts in life is just being good to people. And that was always embedded in the philosophies of Ubuntu and our pre-industrial revolution era, that communities looked after each other and cared for each other and the well-being. Nowadays, we're so individualized that we will walk past somebody who's been mugged on the street and not even look at them because we don't want to get involved with the issue. Okay. Someone asked me the other day, so what's your philosophy in life? And at this point in time in my life, it's become a very simple one. Be nice to people. Simple. If you are nice to people, people will be nice to you, and life will be good to you, and the universe will be nice to you. So that's my philosophy in life.
I love hearing that, and I really want to reiterate what you said, that when you're nice to people, it's actually good for you. It actually changes your biology, and your body thrives, as does your mind. And it's just amazing. People, I think, and I'd love to know your thoughts on why people are so individualistic. We can call it modern day living, but what drives people? Because I really believe that human beings are fundamentally good. They're born good, and they have goodness at the core of their being. So why do they become individualistic, and what drives them to walk past somebody who's just been mugged? What what's behind that? Because as we've both said, when you take care of other people, it's good for you. So it's driving them away from what's good for them. And yet, for some unknown or unclear reason, people are living individualistically. Can you say something about that?
Sure. And, I've done quite a lot of research into that as well. And historically, for humans, as we evolved over the centuries, millennia, our original way of surviving was being part of a group and belonging to a group. And in the numbers, you either found solace and help, and you depended on each other to find food or to find security or to find shelter. Okay. And that way of life and supportive structure was there right through, even in many of the what we might have seen as quite dark ages of the Romans and the Mongols and all of the war and mayhem that took place 2,000, 3,000 years ago. There was at the back of that always in their rural communities a sense of community. That same sense of belonging and needing to be looking after each other. It was when the Industrial Revolution came in, this is what I'm reading and finding out, and the need for mass production and being competitive, because at that same time our modern economy principles and practices and ideologies emerged, that people were required to coalesce more and more, to be around factories, to go to work, to man the machines, and to earn a living by outcompeting the other person to get a bigger bonus, a bigger incentive, or whatever it was in that factory when they incentivized it. And even though there was still a gentle or a general evolution towards that individualism, then it was more recently globally that in some of the countries, America, etc., really large corporate processes emerged with people that had ideologies of winner takes all. Life had never been like that before. Okay. And I don't want to be romantic about, yes, in the old Middle Ages in England, there was always an aristocracy and the feudal system, and people were suppressed, etc. The people that were suppressed looked after each other. Okay. But modern economy and modern ideology teaches us to outcompete everybody else and to be top dog, to be better than everybody, to swim faster, work harder, to be seen to be the one that stays until 8 o'clock at night so that they are going to be the next one promoted, etc., etc. And that's not healthy. I'll give you an example. I was mentally in that kind of space at one point in time. When I left national parks in Zimbabwe, I moved to what was then Bophuthatswana and joined the National Parks Board there. And I was one of the people that helped start Pilanesberg. And I was sitting in my office in Pilanesberg, and my boss, wonderful man, Bob Thompson, I just arrived there a week or so into it. And at 5 o'clock, he left his office and walked past mine. And I was beavering away, working hard. And he said, "Steve, what are you doing?" I said, "No, I'm working. You wanted that report, I'm going to get it to you first thing in the morning." He said, I asked you just to get it to me sometime tomorrow, not first thing in the morning. Okay. I said, "No, but I'm eager beaver. I'm going to get it to you first thing in the morning." He said, No. He said, "Let me tell you something." Okay. He said, "We are here as a family. all of these people that work here, we're here as a family. Those people that are back there in the houses, your kids, your wives, and everything like that, they are as important to me and your well-being as getting the work done. He said, so this is the very last time that you work after 5 o'clock because your family needs you back there to be with them. Okay. And I never want to see this happen again. And it changed my whole philosophy about being competitive, because the truth came home to me that if you actually think of around us here in Johannesburg, for me, everybody is just working flat out, trying to get. I go for walks at 5:30 in the morning, and there are people going to their offices in their cars at 5:30 in the morning. And you're thinking, why are you there when your company only starts at 8? Why are you there at 6? Why are you staying after hours, etc., etc.? And it's just that corporate culture that's pushed us to the point where we have to become individuals to be seen, to be recognized, to stay on in our positions, etc. And so the whole ideology we have is this modern economy system is driving us towards this lack of caring. Okay. Caldwell has written the one book called Outliers. You might have read it, Sue. And in it he quotes the piece of research that doctors in America carried out on a little village of people that originally came from the mountains in Italy. And they had moved lock, stock, and barrel the whole village to this place in America as immigrants many years prior to that. And that village had a very low heart disease level. And when they researched it, they found that they brought that culture of a little village with them into this place in America, and they had those same customs of when you finished at work at 5 o'clock, on your walking back to your house, you stopped off at everybody's gates and you said hi to each other and how are you, and you discussed everything and you looked after each other. And if someone was sick, you went and met them, took them food or whatever it was. That so much of that's gone, and that to me is the reverse that we need to be influencing to take place globally with conscious leadership.
So you're saying, and I think it's really interesting, that actually competition is in fact what's driving us away from well-being, from doing the things that are actually inherently good for us. And competition is driven by a need to shine and to stand out and to be the winner that takes all.
I think it's the winner takes all element. Okay, competition's not a bad thing. Okay. We wouldn't have progressed scientifically if there wasn't some level of competition. Okay. But when it gets to winner takes all, what I see in the consulting I'm doing is here in South Africa, but in Rwanda, where I work as well, is that there is a shift in corporate, okay, back towards understanding and accepting that there has to be a greater level of acceptance of that the people are not machines, that they do have lives to live, and their well-being is critical to the performance of the company. And that it's not just beating them to be there earlier. I worked for a company, a project, an American company, where it was expected that you arrived at least an hour before everyone got to work in the morning, and you stayed at least 1 hour afterwards. And if you wanted promotion, you stayed 2 hours afterwards. Okay, so they got 3 hours for free out of you. And that was expected. They built it into the culture. And that's just so the antithesis of well-being. You can't operate like that.
And in a way, it's really sad because the quality of the productivity and contribution is diminished by the lack of well-being that kind of mentality produces. So actually, your brilliance can't come to work every day because your brilliance required some rest and some downtime and some balance.
Yeah, it's that balance. having time to meditate, having time to play sport, exercise, having time just to sit with your wife or kids and have quality interaction, and just impart those wonderful values and through whatever you do, your games, whatever you play with your kids. But having that time, so many families, people leave before their kids wake up and they come back when the kids are sleeping and they never know their kids. Okay. And so I love on your website, your circle and the elements that make it up, because it shows that interconnectedness, not only in nature, but in our physiology. The results of the stressful life that those corporates are kind of dumping on you have a hormonal influence on you, constant stress, okay, being treated badly or just, not well. Then the anxiety you have, and, you worry that you have, I might get fired or whatever. And that blows back on your immune system. It then affects the whole process. I've actually witnessed in my life when people have been really treated badly and had some traumatic thing happen from a work situation that was so traumatic, okay, that when people were really, really badly treated, okay, and that affected them so much, you could almost trigger a reverse analysis on the timeline to that point when they actually, their immune system was so depressed that they got cancer. And that wouldn't have happened if they were in a nice work environment, loving relationship at home with their kids, etc. Okay. And so we do ourselves a disservice by getting into those situations of anxiety and stress, etc. The neuroscience of it shows that if we don't manage that with a work-life balance, okay, we are setting ourselves up for an early death at some point.
Yeah, I think I'm a scientist at heart, and there isn't exact research to make that connection quite clear, but there is very good research to show that loneliness has a direct correlation with an early death and with suffering from dreaded diseases, especially of the heart. And I think it's really important for people to know, because we can sit here and blame corporates, and yes, I'm sure corporates are on a level to blame, but what does that give us? I think it's really important for people to recognize and remember at all times that they have a choice. It is your life, and I've been intrigued to see. I've got my son who has started his first job. He's 23, and his girlfriend is living it with me at the same time, and she's also just started her first job. And I've got a new physio working for me, who's also early on in his career. And I've been fascinated to see how they advocate for their own lives. They're very clear on they want to get ahead. I mean, they're very ambitious people, all three of them, but they know that balance is essential to their lives, and they're not prepared to work 24 hours of the day. They want to have work-life balance, and they don't want to work at the weekend, and they want to have a healthy lifestyle. And so I've been really gratified to see how the younger generations are better at it maybe than we are. Perhaps they watched their parents, and perhaps they watched what the outcome has been of an unbalanced lifestyle. And as you well know, I've just written a book called The Sweet Spot, which is all about how to find balance. So I think it's been my life work to try and seek out ways to enable people to find balance. And I think that's what you're saying, Steve. And I love that you've put it across so clearly. And I just love that story about your very wise boss from the Pilanesberg. Wow. I mean, a lot of leaders could learn from him.
Yes. And you know what? everybody just loved that guy to death. He was just such a humanist, okay, and it's such a great human being. The 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 thing that you just mentioned there with the millennials, my experience with the millennials, and I love them and the Gen X's, is I think they've been observing over many years, decades, okay, that same impact you were mentioning. And they have a mind of their own, and they have inherently amongst their cadre, okay, some values that have emerged that are kind of more conscious than in our time. And they stand by that. I've watched millennial after millennial person. If they're in a work situation where they don't get what they want out of it or treated badly, they just vote with their feet. They up sticks and move on to the next job. It might mean that they are without a job for a while, etc., but they just refuse to be treated in that bad way. Okay, and I love it. I see a transformation coming in, and they are bringing this breath of fresh air. Yesterday, I was talking to a group of people about the millennials, and it was that, in fact, it was a group of young people who started a company. I was sitting in a kind of a presentation session, and they were sitting behind me. There were 5, 6 of them, and I said, "Wow, are you just the workers?" No, we're the owners. Us 6, okay, we own this company, okay. And oh wow, okay. And when I at the tea time went and spoke to them, they were really, really so tuned in what they want, how they're going to do stuff together. There's no like this. And the wonderful thing that I loved about it was they said, there's no leader amongst us. We are leaders in different things when it's needed. Okay. So if there's that job over there and those are the people best placed to lead it, they do it and we all follow. And then tomorrow this work has to be done. I'll be the leader. They'll all follow me. Okay. And it's what we call in the consulting game connected leadership, where it's a very flat hierarchy and adaptive. And I think they are going to show over time that they will live longer lives because they don't have that stress, because they just love working with each other in that communal way of, that we've been trying to aspire to.
But I think in addition to living longer, longevity is an aspect of well-being. But I think the other aspect of well-being that they're going to get better than many of their parents, let's say, or the older generation, is happiness, is joy, is presence. Yeah. Because is lack of stress or less stress, because they are they're able to advocate for themselves and they're able to make choices. So yeah.
Something you said earlier, if I tried to put across that all of this is to blame and laid at the feet of corporates, I really kind of don't really mean that. Okay, I think it's just the global consciousness is at that level. I think, and I've experienced this in my life in a number of situations, okay, is equally stressing and making people anxious, etc. You can be in a really good marriage and everything like that with a wonderful family and still feel lonely and that you don't belong. Yeah. And I've seen that with friends of ours, and other families, that there might be kids in the family who just don't feel they don't belong because they're treated differently, or the husband doesn't feel that he belongs, the wife doesn't feel that she belongs. And you can be lonely in a relationship in so many ways as well. And I think that's something that people in the line of work that you do and I do from my side of things is to get people to accept being. A wonderful book that transformed my life when I read it recently is called Ego is the Enemy. I don't know if you've read it. It's an amazing book. And it actually shows you how your ego in this competitive world that we have can so often be the triggers of so many of our ills, societal ills that we have. And that once you can control your ego, especially with emotional intelligence, which is something I'm passionate about, I recently became a practitioner in a process that's based upon personality typing. This particular one, Lumina, is dynamic personality typing. We're never a set type of person. We're different people in different situations all throughout a day. Okay. But it's based around emotional intelligence and helping us to understand ourselves, understand how other people are, because you share information in your personality situations. It helps with your leadership work, and especially when people want to and are ready for it, to do deep dives into emotional intelligence and emotional, what I call maturity, but even better, emotional resilience. Okay. That's where you can actually come to know your true self and to know others as well. But once you know your true self in particular situations, you're able to come to terms with what you need to be and not what others expect you to be. So authenticity. Brené Brown, Braving the Wilderness, one of the best books I've read.
So just to come back, I haven't read your book, Ego is the Enemy, but I do believe that we are all equipped with an ego, which we absolutely need in this world. We can't turn against our own ego. It's essential to our survival, and yet the analogy I always use is we got to put our ego in the passenger seat, and not in the driver's seat. And perhaps that's what you're saying. And yes, to try and know yourself is one of the greatest routes to well-being. The better you understand who you are, and the better you understand how you come across to the world, and can see yourself from the outside, the better. So I love these books that you've mentioned, Ego is the Enemy, and of course Brené Brown, and you've mentioned Braving the Wilderness, but I think that she's written so many and they're all as wonderful as one another. All of her books, she really is a genius at putting across these important concepts. So thank you for alerting us to those books, and also to the fact that ego is often what takes us away from self-acceptance and builds us a wall around ourselves, and isolates ourselves, and drives us into a state of loneliness. So
Yes.
yeah, thank you for that. And Steve, tell us a little bit about waterhole wisdom. What is that, and what can we learn from it?
So with the time that I was active in the field in wildlife management in Zimbabwe, all across many of those parks, etc., here in Southern Africa, but I've worked in many of the parks in Eastern Southern Africa. There are so many lessons from nature that apply in our life sense and in our business context. Okay. And I like to, when I'm either coaching or doing my professional speaking or facilitating, I love to bring in the analogy of wildlife. Okay, let me give you an example. When I first joined national parks, funny story, I just arrived in Wellbeing National Park, and with my family, my wife and daughter, in our house. The following morning, after we'd arrived, I was taken by the senior ranger to meet the park warden, Norman Payne. And Ollie Coltman took me in, and I'd been working in business and dealing with CEO suite and everything a lot. So taken in to meet Norman Payne, and Ollie Coltman says, Mr. Payne, I'd like you to meet Steve Johnson. Steve, this is Norman Payne. So I put out my hand and I said, hi, Norman. And he'd just been putting his hand out to shake mine, and he pulled it back and he looked at me, and then he turned to Ollie Coltman and said, take this young man and put him on a 5-day patrol into the park for being so forward and not respectful. Okay, my name is not Norman to him. I'm Mr. Payne. And so I was punished on my first day joining the national parks. The following day, I found myself in the middle of nowhere in the national parks with a wonderful man. This was meant to be universe at work. Sergeant Petros Ndlovu was the guy that was sent to accompany me into the bush. And we spent 5 days just out there. And we were sitting under a tree up around looking over a water hole, and a big herd of elephants, a cow herd with babies came, and they were drinking, etc. He was an Indebele man, one of my most favorite people. And he, in Indebele, said, "Inhlambini wezindlovu, konke kungu kwakho. Konke kungu kwakho." And I didn't know Indebele at the time, so I looked at him and I looked at the elephant herd because he was pointing at them. And I said, "Petrus, like, what are you telling me?" He said, "Mr. Steve, look at that elephant herd." So I said, "Yeah." He said, "Every elephant in that herd is trying to be the best elephant it could be. And every elephant in that herd belongs, and none of them are ever left behind." And it was such a wonderful analogy. I think he was trying to tell me in the kind of idiomatic way that often teaching takes place in rural communities, that people need to emulate that. And so I've used those types of metaphors often, especially in business, whether it's a leopard stalking an impala at a water hole and what the dynamics are with all of the other animals, etc., or how a flock of guinea fowls, their habit of scurrying around and digging up things for grubs and everything, or a flock of Namaquid doves wheels in over the water hole and lands and then takes off again and lands and takes off. There's a purpose in why they do that. It's not just that they are silly birds that land and take off again. It's if there's any danger at that water hole as they land and take off again, it distracts with any predator that might be there. Okay, and until they all see that it's safe, and then they'll all settle and drink. Okay, but they don't just all land. Okay, because then they could get attacked. Okay, so analogies like that. So how do you do that in business? What would you do in a family sense? Okay, of the example I give them, where you relate natural situations. It might be, why certain trees grow in a certain area and not in another. Why you find businesses in a certain area and not in another. You can use so many of those analogies. Okay, why does a chameleon change its color? How does that relate to working in a business? If you're not adaptive and resilient like a chameleon, okay, then you're going to get noticed and maybe taken out by the competition, or you're just going to fail because you're the wrong color. Just the kind of things that I talk about. So it's the wisdom that you find at the water hole, and often it just comes to my mind as I'm training people or facilitating a workshop. An example will come to mind, and I'll use it, and people enjoy it.
I've no doubt, because no one can refute the wisdom that you're talking about. And, I think everybody realizes somewhere deep down inside themselves that nature has all the answers for us. Yeah. And I love, the way that you bring it to people's awareness so that they can, through stories, so that they can take it away and use it. I've heard you speak many times, and that's always what you do in your talks, which is, really great. So you learn unforgettable lessons.
Yeah, making it interesting for people is the thing to get it embedded in their mind. You're right.
I do think that one of the wisdoms of the waterhole that you talk about is for people to reconnect with nature, to get out of their buildings and get outside even if it's just to stand next to a tree or look at the sky for a little while, or feel the grass underneath your feet. You don't have to actually go to the bush if you can't get there, but just get into nature a little bit, because that is where all the wisdom lies, and that's actually where you come alive and where you can experience the simple pleasures of being alive.
Yeah, just a simple thing. I've seen it with the people I work with. I take CEOs and corporate C-suite people, and you take them out from the hotel conference room out into a garden or whatever it is, but preferably in a more natural area. But you actually get them to go and hug a tree, and they're like, I'm not a tree hugger. Come on. It's just like, this is like a dumb exercise. I said, just work with me. Just go and hug the tree and put your head next to it, and imagine that you can hear the sap flowing in the tree, and that the little insects scurrying in the bark and everything like that. Just do it for me for 3 minutes or 5 minutes. Okay, just do it. And I've had CEOs doing that, and after they've got over their embarrassment of being a tree hugger, they then just do get into the mode, and some of them start crying because they suddenly realize that this isn't just a tree, it's a living thing. They've always seen it as an inanimate object that just is there, okay? But when they actually start to relate to it, okay, it's amazing what it does inside you.
Yeah. Quite profound, actually. I remember having a patient come to me once. He was suffering from enormous stress, and his wife had just walked out on him, and he'd come home from work and just found that she'd left. And he said to me, I've never forgotten his words. He said, I walked out into my garden in total despair. And he said, I suddenly looked around me and I saw this gorgeous garden that is part of my home. And he realized that for the first time in his life, he'd actually noticed the garden he lived with. He said it was actually such a realization to me that I had all this beauty around me and I hadn't even seen it. I'm very happy to tell you that that very same person is now back together with his wife in a totally transparent way. But I think it was such a lesson for me to hear what he shared that day, and you're talking about exactly that. So thank you for the work that you do and for awakening people, and thank you for sharing that with us today in this podcast. I've got one more question, and I know we're running out of time, but I'll just give you 1 or 2 minutes just to quickly tell us, what is the League of Legends that you speak about?
The League of Legends relates back to the quest that we have in our life for meaning and purpose. Okay. And so I've got this program that I've developed where when people are ready, we take them through a sequence of levels where we allow you time for reflection and mindfulness, etc. After having watched some videos and read a few papers or books, then answer a few questions to yourself and do some social project. The quest, go and do some good. It's the good, doing good all day, every day. Okay. And once you've done that, we then take you to the next step on the journey towards meaning. So we start as a squire, which is in ancient times used to be the person who walked next to the knight on his armor on the horse. Then the next level is an equerry, where it's like a personal assistant, where in that level you learn about values and service, etc. The middle level is you become a warrior, and you have rules about being a warrior. You can't just be a savage, okay? And your quest then takes you to the fourth level, where you're a sovereign, where it's servant leadership, that you or giving back. And then the final level that you get to is where your self-actualization comes in, where you actually do find out what you feel is the meaning in your life at that point in time, when that what your life has been about. And then you become a League of Legend or a legend that takes the same other people on similar journeys. So it's a wonderful way of helping people find that ultimate meaning in their life, self-actualization.
On a level, reverse engineering their death. What what do you want to be leaving behind when you go? Yeah, wow, amazing. I must share, if it's okay for you in this last moment, my sister sadly and tragically passed away suddenly just over a year ago. She had a brain aneurysm, and one of the things that brought me and all my family such unbelievable comfort in that very terrible time was the outpouring from all of her. She was a coach and had done a lot of management consulting, and all of the clients that she'd worked with just poured out message after message of what an unbelievable impact she'd made and difference she'd made in their lives, and all the things that that they held as gifts that she'd given them. And it was just a mind-blowing and so inspiring to me, to make sure that that's how I live my life. So I've really had the I didn't put it in quite the way that you're putting it, but the necessity of reverse engineering. What legacy are you leaving? And if you can think about it now, you get to plan it. And yeah, fantastic. Ultimate well-being, when you can get to your deathbed and say, I lived my life the way I wanted to. Amazing.
And I made a difference.
I made a difference. Yeah, I left the world a better place. And that is the ultimate way to die, I'm sure. Not that I've tried dying, but yeah, that's what I imagine. So,
and the message there is be nice to people.
Yeah, I love that. So simple. So simple. Be nice to people. And people always say it's the way you make them feel that they'll remember about you. And that is about being nice to people. Yeah, sure. Thank you so, so much. I could really keep on chatting for a long, long time, and I'd far rather not end right here. But I know that our listeners have a finite amount of time to devote to listening, so we don't want to go on and on that they don't actually get to hear all your pearls of wisdom. So thank you for all that you've shared. If people want to get hold of you, how do they get hold of you best?
So they can go to my LinkedIn profile, or my email address is I'll give it to you to put on the podcast, stevovoj03@gmail.com, and I'll give you my phone number as well.
Great, and we'll put those details.
My company is called Growth Leaders is the company. Yeah.
Growth Leaders. So either Steve Johnson or Growth Leaders if you don't get to look at all that we've written, because I know when I do listen to a podcast, I'm often running or at gym or something. So I like people to have that in their memories as well. Thank you so, so much, Steve. And I wish you all the best with all the wonderful work you're doing. And may you always have well-being, and may your legacy be incredibly powerful, which I know it will be. Thank you.
Thanks so much. My privilege.
So much. So we've just had an amazing time with Steve Johnson, and I'd just like to highlight some of the things that he raised for us so that they're easy for you to remember. One of the things that he spoke about is his amazing moment of awakening at the age of 4, which I thought was really a profound description that he gave us. He also spoke about how being part of nature in a very painful moment in his life was incredibly healing for him, and how he recognized that nature needed to be protected, but also that it was really important for him to make time in his life to be in nature, and that was the beginning of his career. He talked about how people are people. We're all the same, and that was one of his values that he was raised with. And we're all on a journey towards self-actualization and finding meaning and purpose in life. He talked about how equity and fairness are at the center of his own value system and of what he proposes for people. He spoke about legacy-based leadership, where doing good all day, every day, in the moment is the key factor. And he said it over and over again. His philosophy is be kind to people. Just be kind to people, always. And he spoke about leaving the world a better place and looking after each other as being integral to your own well-being, and how belonging is integral to your survival. And he spoke about chameleons and how essential it is to be adaptive, just like a chameleon. And I could go on, but these are highlighting just some of the wisdom that came across in this amazing podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and I wish you that you could have ultimate well-being and that you can take a step towards creating your ultimate well-being as a result of what you've heard here today. Take care, and remember, you deserve to thrive. Bye for now.
Please push the subscribe button so that you can be alerted when future episodes are available. Thank you for listening.